Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Let's go to Brad from Patreon.
Yes.
Dan, you're a Pac-12 guy. Explain to me why George Clavicle's plan, George Kliavkoff, excuse me, Brad,
Yeah.
to bring SMU and San Diego State into the conference would make any sense whatsoever.
Rumoredly,
Can't see any real tangible value that justifies adding them. So yeah, this is rumored. It's probably a very poorly kept secret at this point. There was a tweet that you sent me from a gentleman, Jason Shear, who said that at a swim and dive championship banquet in Houston yesterday, the San Diego State athletic director told people that the Aztecs will be joining the Pac-12. It will be announced soon. So, this has been reported for a while. The rumors have been there for a while. Where are you at as a Pac-12 fan? How do you feel about all this? Does it make sense? Is it good for the conference?
I feel like as I hear a dog barking in the background, your dog must have a lot of thoughts about West Coast football expansion.
She tends to get boisterous.
Yeah.
As she is right now.
Yeah.
Whenever we talk about things that disgruntle us one way or the other.
Okay. So this is obviously two major markets, the Dallas-Fort Worth market with SMU and San Diego, which I don't think is an enormous market, but it's a big place. It's bigger than Eugene, Oregon. It's bigger than Palo Alto. It's bigger, Palo Alto, I guess, is part of the broader Bay Area and Silicon Valley, but bigger than Pullman, Washington. And so I look at San Diego State and I'm like, okay, this is an interesting, at least, right? They've had big basketball success, which is that's not the sport we're talking about here, but as it's a huge campus, I think a ton of kids. Enrollment's pretty huge at San Diego State. They have a history of winning football over the past decade, 12, 15 years. Brady Hoke Part 1, Rocky Long, and now Brady Hoke once again. Big names have come out of that program. I didn't realize the number of names associated with San Diego State, by the way. Like a ton of NFL coaches, obviously Marshall Faulk going back to the 90s. Yeah, it has been a program, not a major program, but that has had an impact on the sport at large. They have the new stadium. They don't have an NFL team anymore. They have a Major League Baseball team. They don't have an NBA team. And with UCLA and USC leaving, I assume there's still going to be a lot of interest in LA and Southern California and UCLA and USC football. But if there are a host of 3-star, borderline 3-4-star type kids who don't get that USC and UCLA offer, but have the ability to stay in Southern California and go to San Diego State, whereas maybe they had otherwise thought, well, I'll go to Arizona or I'll go to Cal or I'll go to Oregon State or something like that. You can build up the roster to a Power 5 level at San Diego State, of course. So that to me is at least interesting if you're talking about schools to add value to the conference because of its location, because it has a winning infrastructure to a certain point. SMU hasn't had that as long in the recent past. And I also think where SMU is located, it's like in 14th place in terms of interest of team, right? Because you're talking about, okay, obviously the Cowboys and Texas football and Oklahoma football. You have a playoff team in TCU, a small footprint in terms of an alumni base, but you have the Mavs, you have the Texas Rangers, right? That it's a completely saturated market. And so SMU going from big G5 conference to smallish, medium Power 5 conference, whatever the Pac-10, 12 ends up looking like. This is as an outsider, and it's an assumption, and it's a guess. How much does that actually move the needle for local fans? Are people going to swarm to SMU games because Oregon State or Cal or Arizona State's in town when so much of that area is consumed with fandom to much larger organizations? So that to me is just sort of, there's somebody we can add, but not really. And so big picture, I think the Pac-12 is in a lot of trouble. If George Clavicle can find a bunch of money via ESPN and streaming services, Amazon obviously is the big name, so be it. Good on him. But in terms of the future of the conference, if you can get that $25 to $30 million per year, it's still dwarfed by the Big Ten and the SEC. But if you can get around that number and you can get Washington and Oregon at least short term on board to see what can happen with the conference, it's a big win for those two schools because their path to the playoff is super smooth, right? That those are the two teams right now that seem to be building towards okay, we're in a good spot to get into a 12-team playoff. We have a smooth sailing through this conference because Cal and Stanford and Washington State and Oregon State and the Arizona schools will not build up rosters in this way. Utah's right there. I left Utah out, unfortunately. Utah's also there with Oregon and Washington. They're just not that big name, organizational franchise type name that is coveted on a national level. But yeah, it's smooth sailing for those schools. But then what is the Big 12 going to offer, right? How much do you want to be in on the ground floor of what essentially becomes a startup? I don't know, man. If I'm Oregon and I'm Washington, I sign on short term and see how USC and UCLA like being on an island in the Big Ten. They're going to make a ton of money, but that kind of travel is going to become a lot for those schools. And if the Big Ten is looking to compete with the SEC, to have that big Western division, you could see that being attractive. I'm sure Oregon and Washington would snap up a Big Ten offer in a matter of seconds if it came their way. It's hard to see a Pac-12 existing with San Diego State and SMU existing on anywhere near the level of the SEC and Big Ten come 2030, right?
Here's another question for you.
Do you have any thoughts as an outsider?
Well, my thoughts as an outsider are, I don't feel, if I were a Pac-12...
Because I'm a stakeholder. I want Oregon to succeed. I want Oregon to be on the national stage and keep succeeding. Yeah.
I mean, I like the Pac-12.
Right.
And I don't want to see this kind of turmoil surrounding the conference. I think it sucks royally that USC and UCLA are leaving.
Yep.
I will always associate USC, UCLA with the Pac-12, as many people will. Mm-hmm. As many do with the Houston Astros in the NL, right?
Yeah.
That type of, it's one of those deals for me as a sports fan. My thought is, without any real skin in the game, is that when I see a Twitter posting like the one that we saw about a week ago now, the joint statement, quote, the 10 Pac-12 universities look forward to consummating successful media rights deals in the very near future based upon positive conversations with multiple potential media rights partners over the past few weeks. We remain highly confident in our future growth. And I'm not going to read the rest of it. If you have to say that, that doesn't leave me feeling confident.
Right.
Why post that at all? That to me was a little bit weird. And I do think that the article's been written. This isn't my idea.
Right.
I think there's an outside chance that the whole thing could go bust, depending on how these media rights negotiations go. There's a chance the whole thing could go boom. That if they can't come to an agreement that's beneficial for everybody, we're staring down the barrel of more conference realignment as a result of Pac-12 or Pac-10 or whatever this is, inability to get a deal done. I don't think that's likely, but I think the fact that that's on the table at all, that people have written that article at all in February of 2023,
right?
I don't know. That doesn't leave me feeling all that confident about where things head next. So, the San Diego State move, California better than I do, right? You know California much better than I do. Pulling SMU into this potentially, again, it feels a little weird to me. I don't know. It just seems like you're trying to get numbers as opposed to adding real quality. No offense to SMU people out there. So I don't know. They're in a very awkward spot now because of those two California schools deciding to go and join the Big Ten.
I still am a proponent, and I have no idea how feasible it is because all of a sudden it's not a network necessarily negotiating, a conference negotiating with networks. I'm a big proponent of the what is it when they on like the NFL Red Zone network where we're going four wide, so many teams in the red zone. I want Oregon, Washington, the Bay Area schools. I'm still micro conference Dan. That's where I'm at. Negotiate your deal. Have deals with the ACC. Have deals with the Big 12. Have deals with the Big 10, right? So you get all these matchups. Have a deal with Notre Dame. Like an annual rotating Oregon or Washington or Stanford with Notre Dame. That seems like a win. That seems like a huge win. Give Notre Dame 2 home games to your 1. Fine, whatever. Sign all sorts of deals and go 4 wide with those that they're in the same geographic footprint, so you can still travel relatively local. You play each other and you sign deals with other conferences and you get to that number, that magic number, while controlling your own TV deals, right? Because right now Oregon and Washington kind of have George Clavicle by the gonads, for lack of a better term. So now are they going to get more money like USC probably should have been getting from the Pac-12 under Larry Scott? it's entirely possible that they're going to sign $29 million deals, and some of the smaller Pac-12 schools are going to sign $23 million deals. So I'm still that micro-conference four-wide kind of proponent.
Micro-conference four-wide kind of guy. Yeah, this is, by the way, this is directly from Dennis Dodd article. I was looking for it as I was saying it. Quote, industry sources still project a media rights deal split between ESPN and Amazon for the embattled conference.
Right.
However, the dissolution of the Pac-12 is being talked about openly in those same industry circles as a potential consequence if the league does not wrap up its deal soon.
Right.
The fact that it could happen in these tenuous times is enough to project what the process might look like. So that does not instill confidence in any sense.
Look, the most realistic way this all falls apart is the Arizona schools, the corner schools, Arizona schools, Colorado, Utah joining the Big 12. So the Big 12 is now trying to compete with the other mega conferences without the headline names. But in terms of the depth of quality teams, they're approaching. They're absolutely approaching. When you add Utah, who's been a top 10, 12, 15 national program lately, Colorado has more juice because of Dion. You know, Arizona, both Arizona schools have been to conference championship games, so we know what those look like built up. So then the Big 12 becomes a lot more interesting. And then you're left with the Bay Area schools and the Pacific Northwest schools. And so then you're going to see the Sharks, right? The Sharks are going to be swimming in the water for that chum, and somebody's going to pick up Oregon and Washington, be it the Big Ten, be it, you know, some sort of affiliation with other conferences, but not fully joining the other conferences. And then where does that leave Oregon State and Washington State?
I mean, it puts us right back to where we were like a year ago.
Right.
It puts us right back into the meat of that discussion where, you know, honestly, if we're talking about one whole conference shuttering and teams scattering, now we're talking about what happens with Notre Dame. Now we're talking about what happens with Florida State. These conferences.
Well, the ACC grant of right things. They're
the
just so
grant
hard
of rights
to get
thing
out of that. Yeah,
it's crazy, but you know we're starting to have those types of conversations again, and we're right back to square one. People were not happy about that conversation with regard to USC and UCLA.
Yeah,
people were very affected by that, and we saw a lot of the emails and the comments. It left a lot of people feeling like college football was going to a bad, dark place. And, you know, maybe it's still headed there, but we'll see where this goes. The Pac-12. It's definitely interesting to follow.
Would have been interesting. I know there were conversations, right? The Big 12 and Pac-12 aligning themselves with each other, but they couldn't figure it out in terms of a value add. And like, is it worth it to add these teams into like a semi deal or something like that? You know, that would have been a move from the Pac-12 signaling we don't have anywhere else and have no other exit plan. So we're going to take $22 million each instead of, you know, gambling on ourselves in the open market. And so that would have been a signal that it was waving the white flag as a sovereign nation.